Okay, boys and girls, we are going to work on writing our reading response. This is a practice reading response, and I'm gonna get you started on it, and then you're going to finish it. And this reading response is a summary reading response from what we read. So I have my graphic organizer. When we do a graphic organizer, this is the beginning process of our writing. So a graphic organizer is just there to organize our ideas. We don't have to write complete sentences by any means. So when we are going to write a summary, we're going to talk about the characters, the setting, the beginning of the chapter, the middle of the chapter, the end of the chapter. If we're talking about an entire book, we're going to talk about the beginning of the book, the middle of the book, and the end of the book, okay? So for chapter 6, from the book that we've been reading, The Top 10 Ways to Ruin the First Day of 5th Grade by Ken Derby, we're going to talk about chapter 6 here specifically. So our characters in this chapter are Tony, family, David Letterman, and Mr. Gore. So I have those written out. And our setting, remember, is time and place. It's at home in the evening and at school the next day. Now the beginning of our chapter is where Tony gets a phone call from David Letterman, and he doesn't believe it at first, but David eventually convinces him that it's David Letterman. So that's our beginning. And I don't have that all in a complete sentence. I just have phone call from David Letterman, doesn't believe at first. Then, in the middle of the chapter is where his parents come home and his sister, and they're teasing him and they're not believing him that David Letterman has called. So the family doesn't believe until they get a phone call. So I've written that for our middle. Then I have the end of our chapter where he asked Mr. Gore to go with him to New York City to see David Letterman and be on the show. And so I have written here, Mr. Gore agrees. So I have my characters, my setting, what happens at the beginning, what happens at the middle, and what happens at the end. Remember, this is just our graphic organizer to get our thoughts done. That's the first step of our writing process, okay? So I'm gonna use this graphic organizer to get my writing started, okay? So I'm gonna go over here. And I've written the first 2 sentences for you this today. Now, you're going to finish writing the reading response. So I have my first 2 sentences. My first sentence always has to be what I read, so the title, specific chapter from talking specifically about a chapter, unless I'm talking about the whole book, and then my author. And then my second sentence is my setting, where I'm telling my time and place where the story takes place. So here's my sentence. First sentence. This week I read chapter 6 of the book, The Top 10 Ways to Ruin the First Day of 5th Grade, written by Ken Derby. This chapter, now I'm going to tell the setting, this chapter takes place in the evening at Tony's house and at school the next day. So remember, I have to indent the first line of my paragraph. I have to underline my title and capitalize my title. My first letter of each sentence has to be capitalized because it's a sentence. I have my end marks so that I have complete sentences and they're a complete thought with my subject and my predicate. So I'll read this again. This week I read chapter 6 of the book, The Top 10 Ways to Ruin the First Day of 5th Grade, written by Ken Derby. This chapter takes place in the evening at Tony's house and at school the next day. Now you're going to add 3 to 5 more sentences to this reading response summary. You're going to add what happened at the beginning of the chapter, what happened at the middle of the chapter, and what happened at the end. Now remember, the beginning of the chapter is where Tony gets the phone call from David Letterman wanting him to come to New York City and be on the show. And that he doesn't believe it's David Letterman, he thinks it's Tony D. And then eventually David Letterman convinces him. So you're going to put that into your own words. Then your next sentence is going to be about his family not believing him when he tells them that David Letterman called, wants him to be on the show, and they kind of tease him about it until they get a phone call and they're convinced that yes, it's true. Then your last sentence has to be about him going to school the next day and asking Mr. Gore to go with him and Anna and Mo to New York City to be on the David Letterman show. So you have to add at least 3 more sentences to this reading response. I'm going to put it on a Google Doc, and then you can just finish it adding those 3, 4, 5 sentences. Good luck with your writing, and I can't wait to read what you have written.